Miss, wake up. You've been here all night, Jonathan Whitmore said in a low voice. A hand touched Annie's shoulder lightly. Annie jerked awake. She's first movement was not to fix her hair or wipe the sleep from her face. It was to grab at the papers in her lap. Jonathan Whitmore stepped back when she did. He raised both hands a little to show he meant no harm. "Hey, young lady," he said. "Softer now. Wake up. You're about to lose something priceless." Annie looked down. 3 envelopes had almost slipped from her fingers. One was hanging halfway over her knee, its white corner pointed toward the dirty floor. She snatched it back and pulled all 3 against her chest, as if Jonathan had reached for her lungs instead of a letter. Who are you?" she whispered. Her voice cracked from sleep and dehydration. She pushed herself deeper into the corner of the cold plastic bench. Jonathan took another step back. A small, tired smile crossed his face. "I'm not a thief. I just saved 3 tickets to a different life from this filthy floor." His eyes moved to the letterheads before he could stop himself. "Harvard, Stanford, MIT, full scholarships?" He raised an eyebrow, and this time his surprise was impossible to hide. What kind of genius falls asleep in a hospital hallway holding all that? Annie stared at him. Her eyes were red, guarded. Then she looked down at the envelopes, now wrinkled from the force of her grip. For a moment, something like pride passed across her face. It vanished almost immediately. "Genius?" She gave a dry laugh that had no humor in it. "In this place, these 3 pieces of paper aren't worth as much as 1 bottle of antibiotics." Jonathan stopped smiling. There were answers people gave because they were bitter, and there were answers people gave because life had made them accurate. Annie sounded like the second kind. He glanced toward the double doors at the end of the hall. "You waiting for someone?" Annie nodded. "My mother. Evelyn Carter. Room 318. Before Jonathan could ask more, a nurse came from the nurse's station carrying a clipboard. "Oh, thank goodness, you're still here, Annie," the nurse said. "Your mother's lab results have been delayed another hour. Dr. Morrison will come by when they're back." Her eyes moved to the bench. "You can sit here, honey, but you can't lie down and sleep across the seats." "I'm sorry. It's hospital policy." Annie sat straighter at once. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble." "I know you weren't." The nurse's voice softened. "You've been here since yesterday evening. Nobody thinks you're causing trouble. I'll check on your mama again in a bit," she said. "Try to stay sitting up, all right?" "Yes, ma'am." The nurse touched her arm lightly, then walked away. Just then, the quick strike of high heels against tile cut through the tense quiet of the hallway. "There you are, sir," she said, lowering her head slightly before he even stopped walking. "I finally found you." She glanced at the folder, already opening it, and did not seem to notice Annie at all. "If you don't mind, there's something you need to review before the board packet goes out," the legal team said. Jonathan's brow tightened. He lifted one hand. "Lettre claire." The assistant froze. "Sir, I understand, but this is—" I said later. Jonathan's voice dropped, and the hallway seemed to drop with it. Claire closed the folder at once. Her face changed, all urgency turning into caution. "Of course, sir." Annie watched the exchange without moving. She had known this man was wealthy from his suit, but now she understood something else. Wealth opened doors. Power made people stop talking in the middle of a sentence. Jonathan turned slightly. "Go down to the car and wait for me. Take the folder with you." Claire nodded. Only then did her eyes move to Annie. It was brief, almost accidental, the kind of look people gave to furniture in a room they were passing through. Then she looked away, clutched the folder, and walked back toward the elevators. Jonathan stayed where he was. Part of him knew he should leave. But he could not stop looking at the girl with Harvard, Stanford, and MIT crushed against her chest. Annie noticed. "What?" she asked. Jonathan looked at her face again. "Have you eaten?" She blinked, caught off guard by the ordinary question. "I'm fine." "That's not what I asked. And I didn't ask you anything." Jonathan accepted the answer with a nod. "Fair enough." Annie shifted as if to stand, then swayed. It was slight, but he saw it. "The test results won't be back for another hour," Jonathan said, pointing toward the end of the hallway. "The cafeteria should still be open. Would you like a cup of coffee? My pocket can handle 1 hot Americano." Annie almost refused. Then her stomach answered before she could. It made a low, embarrassing sound in the quiet hallway. Color rose in her cheeks. Jonathan looked away. giving her the dignity of pretending he had not heard. "All right," she said. "One coffee. But I pay for mine. I don't take handouts." Jonathan nodded. "I didn't offer one." She studied him for another second, still unsure. "I'm Jonathan," he said, leaving off the last name. "Annie," she replied. "Annie Carter." He gave a small nod, as if the name mattered because it belonged to her, not because he might one day see it on a contract, a scholarship list, or a headline. They walked toward the elevators with space between them. Annie kept the envelopes pressed to her chest. Jonathan kept his hands where she could see them. Behind them, the plastic bench sat empty under the hospital lights, cold again, waiting for the next person too tired to make it home. The elevator arrived with a soft chime that felt too clean for the hour. Annie stepped in first, still holding the envelopes against her chest. The cafeteria sat beyond a set of double doors, half lit, with only one register open. Behind the counter, an older woman with reading glasses hanging from a chain looked up from wiping a tray. "You folks are lucky," she said. "Coffee's still hot. Food's tired, but coffee's hot." "That's all we need," Jonathan said. Annie reached into the pocket of her hoodie before he could move. The cashier looked at the money, then at Annie's face, and said, "Coffee's $2 after midnight, sweetheart. Hospital special." Annie gave her a small nod. "Thank you, ma'am." Jonathan ordered the same thing, black. Jonathan took a slow sip of coffee and grimaced. That woman oversold it. Annie glanced at him. "You said it would be hot. You didn't say it would be good." "That's fair." For the first time, the corner of Annie's mouth moved like it remembered how to almost smile. It did not last. But Jonathan saw it and was careful not to chase it away. "So," he said, "Annie Carter, what did you do to make 3 schools like that fight over you?" "They didn't fight. They don't hand out full scholarships because they're bored." She looked down at the cup. "I had good grades, test scores, science fairs, some coding competitions. That sounds like the version you give adults who ask too many questions." Annie studied him over the rim of her coffee. "You always talk like that?" "Like what?" "Like you're opening a locked drawer." Jonathan set his cup down. "Occupational hazard." "What occupation?" He paused just long enough for her to notice. "Healthcare technology." "That's broad." "It is." She did not push. Not yet. People with money rarely answered the first question honestly. Annie had learned that from landlords, billing clerks, and men who said they wanted to help but started by asking what she was willing to give up. Jonathan nodded toward the envelopes. "What do you want to study?" "Biomedical engineering. Maybe computational biology after that." She said it quickly, like someone naming a street she had memorized but was no longer allowed to walk down. "I want to build systems that help hospitals predict what they'll need before people suffer from what they don't have." Jonathan leaned back. The answer was not rehearsed. That made it land harder. "You've thought about this." "I've lived around it." "Tell me." Annie gave a short breath. "Most hospitals waste money because they react late. Supplies sit where they aren't needed. Medication expires in one place while another clinic waits 3 days for the same thing. Poor neighborhoods get delays first because nobody calls it a crisis until somebody important is waiting." Jonathan did not interrupt. "In high school, I built a routing model," she said. "It started as a science fair project. Then I kept working on it. It uses patient flow, prescription trends, weather delays, warehouse inventory, and transportation routes to predict where critical supplies should be moved before the shortage happens." "What's it called?" "Pulse Route." The name came out quietly, but not weakly. There was pride in it, guarded but alive. Jonathan's eyes narrowed a little, not in suspicion, in recognition. "You built that yourself?" "Yes." "What language?" "Python first, then some JavaScript for the dashboard. I used public hospital data where I could, simulated the rest, and built a small model using clinic patterns from Wayne County." Jonathan forgot the coffee. "And it works?" "It worked well enough to win state." She looked away. "Not well enough to pay for dialysis." He let the silence sit. The cafeteria hummed around them. A refrigerator clicked on behind the counter. Somewhere near the lobby, an elevator opened and closed. "Which school are you choosing?" Jonathan asked. Annie's face changed before she answered, not dramatically. The light simply went out of her eyes, as if someone had reached inside and turned a switch. "I'm not going." Jonathan heard the words, but they made no sense beside the envelopes on the table. You're deferring? No. Taking a gap year? No. He looked at the letters again. Annie, those are full scholarships. Tuition, she said. Not everything. Not life. Not my mother's medication. Not the rent. Not the part of the bill the hospital says isn't covered. Not the rides when she's too weak for the bus. She has insurance? Annie laughed once under her breath. She has enough insurance for people to say, she has insurance. Jonathan looked down at his coffee. My mother worked in hospital laundry for 16 years, Annie said. Sheets, gowns, towels, all of it. She used to come home smelling like bleach. Said it meant she had done honest work. Then her kidneys started failing. She kept working until her legs swelled so bad she couldn't get her shoes on. Annie rubbed her thumb over the edge of the MIT envelope. Now every week is a bill. Every month is a warning. Every phone call starts with someone saying they understand. Jonathan knew that phrase. He had heard it in customer service trainings, patient assistance scripts, public relations statements. We understand. It was the cheapest sentence in American healthcare. My mom keeps telling me to go, Annie said. She says she didn't raise me to sit in hospital hallways. But she says that from a hospital bed. So what am I supposed to do with that? Jonathan had no good answer. For once, he knew better than to reach for a bad one. Annie reached into her backpack and pulled out another folder, thinner than the college envelopes, printed on cheaper paper. She did not hand it to him. She only set it on the table between them. I got an offer for Pulse Route. Jonathan looked at the top page. From who? Brightpath Innovations. The name entered the air quietly. Jonathan's hand stopped halfway to the folder. Annie did not notice at first. She was staring at the contract like it had already taken something from her. $12,000. If I sign over all rights by tomorrow evening, they wire the money in 48 hours. That buys medication, clears enough of the balance to keep treatment moving, maybe gives us a month where my mother can sleep without pretending she isn't scared. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Brightpath Innovations was not just familiar. It was inside his world, tucked under a subsidiary chain, a company he remembered from a quarterly acquisition report. Efficient, low risk, high upside. That was how Richard Sloan had described it. Annie finally looked up. What? He recovered too late. Nothing. No, that was something. Jonathan sat very still. The cafeteria suddenly felt colder than the hallway. 12,000 for all rights? And a non-compete, 10 years. She gave another dry laugh. Apparently I'm valuable enough to silence, just not valuable enough to pay. Don't sign it. The words came out sharper than he intended. Annie's eyes hardened. That's easy to say when your mother isn't upstairs waiting on a number. Jonathan absorbed that because it was true. She gathered the contract and slid it back into her bag. People keep telling me what not to do. Don't quit school. Don't sell the algorithm. Don't panic. Don't give up. She looked toward the ceiling, toward the floors above them. Nobody tells me how to keep my mother alive while I'm being smart. If you can feel Annie's pain in this moment, please give this video a like. She is not just a girl holding 3 elite university letters. She is a daughter being forced to choose between her future and her mother's life. And if you're still watching Annie's story with us, comment where you're watching from. You never know. Someone near you may be watching this same story right now. Jonathan looked at the 3 letters, then at the girl across from him. A few hours ago, those envelopes had been curiosities. Now they were evidence. He said quietly, "Your mind belongs in a lab." Annie looked at him, tired beyond politeness. Right now it belongs wherever my mother's bill says it has to be. A hospital announcement crackled through the ceiling speaker, calling Dr. Morrison to renal care. Annie stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "That's my mom's doctor." She grabbed the envelopes in her coffee, forgetting the lid. Some spilled over her fingers, but she did not flinch. Jonathan rose with her. "You don't have to come," she said. "I know," but he followed anyway, a few steps behind, carrying the napkins she had forgotten, while the name Brightpath beat in his mind like a warning he should have heard long before Annie Carter ever sat across from him in a hospital cafeteria. They reached the 3rd floor with Annie half a step ahead, moving fast enough that Jonathan could see the effort in it. Her shoulders were squared, but her legs did not trust her. The coffee had spilled across 2 fingers, leaving a red patch near her knuckles. She wiped it once against her hoodie and kept walking. Dr. Helen Morrison stood outside room 318 with a tablet in one hand and reading glasses low on her nose. She was a small woman in her early 60s, gray hair cut short, the kind of doctor who did not waste movement because too many people were waiting for her. When she saw Annie, her face softened before her mouth did. "Annie," she said, "your mother is awake." Annie stopped. "Is it bad?" Dr. Morrison did not answer too quickly. That was how Annie knew it was not simple. Doctors had different silences. Some meant they were choosing gentle words. Some meant they were deciding how much truth a person could stand at that hour. "She's stable right now," Dr. Morrison said. "But the labs show her potassium is still higher than we want, and her creatinine is climbing again. We're adjusting medication, and she'll need dialysis this morning. I want to keep her at least another day." Annie looked through the small window in the door. Her mother was lying under a thin blanket, face turned toward the wall, one hand resting above the sheet. Even from outside, Evelyn Carter looked like a woman trying not to let her daughter see how tired she was. "How much?" Annie asked. Dr. Morrison's eyes flicked to Jonathan for the first time. She recognized him. Of course she did. Everyone in the building knew the man whose name was going on the new renal wing, but unlike the administrators downstairs, she did not straighten or smile. "Let's talk about the medical part first," she said. "That means it's a lot. It means I'm your mother's doctor, not the billing office." Annie gave a short nod, but her jaw tightened. "The billing office always finds me." Dr. Morrison said nothing because there was nothing false in it. She touched Annie's elbow. "She's been asking for you." Annie stepped into the room. Jonathan remained in the hall, but Dr. Morrison looked at him as if measuring whether he had the right to be there. He did not. He knew that. Still, something held him near the doorway. Inside, the room was small, with a curtain drawn halfway around the bed and a television mounted high on the wall with the sound off. A plastic bag of Evelyn's clothes sat on a chair. On the rolling table beside the bed were a cup of ice chips, a church bulletin folded open to a prayer list, and a stack of papers turned face down as if shame could be hidden by flipping it over. "Baby," Evelyn whispered. Annie crossed the room and took her mother's hand. "I'm here." "You ate?" Annie almost smiled. "You're in the hospital and you're asking me that?" That wasn't an answer. "I had coffee." Evelyn closed her eyes. "Lord, give me patience with this child." It was hot coffee. "That does not make it food." Jonathan heard the exchange from the doorway and felt something twist in him. His mother had been dead for 14 years, but for a second he could hear her voice through Evelyn's. Not the words, exactly. The instinct. A mother could be weak enough to need machines and still worry whether her child had eaten. Evelyn opened her eyes and noticed him. Her gaze sharpened. Illness had thinned her face, but not her judgment. "Who was that?" Annie glanced back. "Jonathan. He bought coffee. I paid for mine," Annie added quickly, as if that mattered to her mother as much as it mattered to herself. Evelyn studied him. "Jonathan who?" Jonathan stepped just inside the room. "Jonathan Whitmore, ma'am." Something passed through Evelyn's face. Recognition, then restraint. She had seen his name on plaques and brochures, maybe on the television in the waiting room, when the hospital announced another donation, but she did not look grateful. She looked cautious. "Well," she said, voice dry, "that explains the suit at 3 in the morning." Jonathan accepted that with a small nod. "Yes, ma'am." Evelyn's eyes moved to Annie's chest, where the envelopes were still pressed tight. "You still carrying those letters around like a shield?" Annie looked down. "Mama, don't mama me." Evelyn shifted, wincing before she could hide it. Annie immediately leaned forward, but Evelyn squeezed her hand to stop her. "I asked you a question. They're just letters." "They are not just letters. They are the door I prayed over before it opened." Annie's face hardened in the way children's faces harden when love asks them to do something impossible. "A door doesn't help if I can't walk through it." "You can." "No, I can't. Not with you here." Evelyn turned her head on the pillow and looked at her daughter for a long moment. "Listen to me, Annie Carter. I worked laundry in this hospital for 16 years. I folded sheets until my hands cracked. I cleaned other people's stains. I came home smelling like bleach and heat and that old basement steam. I did that because I believed work was supposed to carry a child farther than it carried the parent." Annie's eyes filled, but she did not let the tears fall. "You think I don't know what you did. I think you know it wrong." Evelyn's voice was weak, but there was iron in it. You look at my work and think it means you owe me your life. That is not what it means. It means I already gave you what I could, and now you are supposed to go. And if I go and something happens to you, something is already happening to me. The sentence landed hard. Even the monitor seemed louder after it. Annie looked away. Don't say that. It is the truth. We do not get to love each other by lying. Evelyn drew a slow breath. You are 18. You got letters from schools I have only seen on television. You built something on that old laptop that sounds like it belongs in a hospital boardroom, not on our kitchen table next to overdue bills. And you are sitting here trying to trade all of that for one more month of me sleeping easier. Annie wiped her face with the heel of her hand. What else am I supposed to do? Evelyn's fingers tightened around hers. Not disappear. Jonathan lowered his eyes. The word found him before he was ready for it. Disappear. He had spent years in rooms where people disappeared into categories: patients, consumers, users, labor, underserved populations, emerging markets. Words smooth enough to cover the person underneath. Annie pulled one of the envelopes free and laid it on the blanket. Harvard. Then another. Stanford. Then the third. MIT. The names looked almost rude in that room. Too clean, too bright beside the IV line and the cup of ice chips. They don't pay for you, Annie said. No school can pay for everything worth keeping, Evelyn said. That does not mean you throw the school away. There's an offer, Annie said, quieter now. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. What offer? Annie hesitated. Annie. For Pulse Route. A company wants to buy it. How much? 12,000. Evelyn stared at her. Then, with the little strength she had, she turned her face toward the ceiling. Jesus, it could help now. It could steal later. Mama, we need money now. Evelyn looked back at her. Who told you your mind was only worth the size of my bill? Annie had no answer. Her mouth trembled once, and she pressed it closed. Evelyn's voice dropped. Baby, if you sell your mind to save my body, neither of us will be free. The room went still. Jonathan felt the words move through him with a force no board presentation had ever carried. They were not dramatic. They were not polished. They were what truth sounded like when spoken by someone with nothing left to protect except the future of her child. Dr. Morrison stood in the doorway now. She had returned quietly, chart in hand, and had heard enough to know not to interrupt. Her gaze shifted from Evelyn to Annie, then to Jonathan. There was something in her eyes he did not like because it looked too much like accusation without needing to become one. Annie bent over her mother's hand. For the first time since Jonathan had found her on the bench, she looked exactly 18. I'm scared, she said. Evelyn lifted her free hand with effort and placed it on Annie's head. I know. I don't know how to do both. You are not supposed to carry the whole world just because the world keeps handing you pieces of it. Annie cried then, quietly, without covering her face. Evelyn stroked her hair the way mothers do when their hands have very little strength left but still remember the motion. Jonathan stepped back into the hall. He had no right to watch more. Dr. Morrison followed him out and pulled the door almost closed. She's brilliant, he said, because it was the safest true thing. Dr. Morrison looked at him. Yes, and that is not what makes this wrong. He said nothing. She should be choosing dorms and classes, the doctor continued. Instead, she's learning which medication her mother can skip without dying too quickly. That is not a failure of character. It is a failure of design. Jonathan looked toward the room. Through the narrow gap, he could see Annie's hand resting over the 3 letters. Dr. Morrison lowered her voice. People like you build wings. You put names on walls. That helps. Sometimes. But a hospital bill can bury a body. Sometimes it buries a future first. Jonathan felt the name Brightpath rise again in his mind. Efficient, low risk, high upside. He looked down at his hands. Hands that had signed acquisitions, pricing structures, distribution agreements. Hands that had never held those papers while a mother begged a daughter not to become the cost of keeping her alive. Inside the room, Evelyn coughed, and Annie reached for the water before the sound finished. Jonathan turned toward the elevators. He did not know yet what he would do, but he knew what he could no longer do. He could no longer pretend he had only met a tired girl in a hallway. By the time Annie got home, the morning had already turned gray. Detroit looked different after a night in the hospital. The houses on her block seemed lower, the sidewalks longer, the old maple trees tired of holding up their branches. A school bus hissed at the corner, taking children somewhere they still believed the day had room for them. Annie stood at her front steps for a moment with her backpack on one shoulder and the 3 college envelopes tucked under her arm, trying to remember when she had last walked through that door without counting something in her head. The house was small, 1 story, brick faded by weather and years of making do. Her mother had bought it with help from Annie's grandfather before the factories started closing and before every block seemed to lose one good family at a time. The porch rail leaned slightly to the left. A plastic chair sat near the door, the kind older neighbors used in summer to watch the street and call out to children by their full names when they were acting foolish. Mrs. Wilkes from next door was already outside in a robe and house slippers, sweeping leaves that would be back by noon. "You just getting in, baby?" Mrs. Wilkes called. "Yes, ma'am." "How's your mama?" Annie paused with the key in the lock. The honest answer was too heavy for the porch. "They're keeping her another day." Mrs. Wilkes stopped sweeping. "You eatin'?" Annie almost laughed. In her neighborhood, that question carried more love than any speech. "I'm about to." "That means no." Mrs. Wilkes pointed the broom at her. "I got oatmeal on the stove. Don't make me bring it over and embarrass you." "I'm okay, ma'am, thank you." "Child, okay is what people say when they don't want help." Mrs. Wilkes stared at her for another second, then softened. "I'll put some in a container. You can pretend you made it." Annie nodded because she did not have the strength to keep refusing. "Thank you." Inside, the house smelled faintly of laundry soap, old wood, and the lavender candle Evelyn lit every Sunday after church. The kitchen table was covered with the life Annie had been trying to keep from collapsing. Prescription bottles, a bus schedule, a half-empty box of saltine crackers, a calculator, hospital discharge instructions from the last visit, and a stack of bills turned face down as if that made them less real. She set the college envelopes beside the pill organizer and stood there looking at them. Harvard, Stanford, MIT. 3 doors on a table that also held a bottle of blood pressure medication they had stretched 2 days longer than prescribed. Her laptop sat near the sink, plugged into an outlet that sometimes sparked if the cord moved the wrong way. Annie opened it, waded through the slow startup, and clicked into the folder labeled Pulse Route Final, though nothing about it felt final. Code filled the screen, lines and logic she understood better than most adults understood their own excuses. She had built the first version at midnight on this same table while her mother slept in the next room, the dryer running in the basement because the noise helped Annie focus. Back then, it had been a science fair project. Then she started reading hospital supply reports, public health data, delays in clinic shipments, pharmacy shortages in Wayne County, weather interruptions, bus routes, refill patterns. She saw waste in one place and absence in another, and the distance between the two made her angry enough to build something. The doorbell rang before she could open the contract. Calvin Brooks stood on the porch holding a grocery bag in one hand and his phone in the other. He was 19, tall and narrow, with an old tiger's cap pulled low over his forehead. They had been friends since 7th grade, back when he beat her in a robotics challenge, and she spent the next 2 years making sure it never happened again. "My mom made food," he said. "Chicken, green beans, cornbread. She said if you don't take it, she's coming herself." Annie stepped aside. "Everybody's threatening me with food today. That's Detroit love. Take the plate or face consequences." He walked into the kitchen and stopped when he saw the table. His eyes moved from the bills to the envelopes to the laptop. He did not joke then. "You went back to that contract?" "I'm looking at it. That's not the same as not signing it." Annie pulled the chair out and sat. "Calvin." "No, don't Calvin me." He put the grocery bag on the counter and came around the table. "Bright Path is robbing you with stationery. You know that, right? They're offering cash in 48 hours. They're offering panic money. There's a difference." Annie opened the email. The contract appeared on the screen, black text on white pages, clean and polite and dangerous. "My mother needs medication. The hospital wants payment. The pharmacy doesn't accept potential. Pulse Route could be worth millions. Not today." She looked at him. "Today it's worth what someone will wire before my mother gets worse." Calvin leaned over the laptop, jaw tight. "Listen to what you just said. That's how they get people. They wait until the house is on fire, then offer to buy the land." Annie stared at the screen. "You got a better offer hiding in that bag with the cornbread?" He had no answer. That hurt them both. Her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, then remembered hospitals loved unknown numbers and fear answered before pride could stop her. "Hello? Annie Carter?" The man's voice was smooth, businesslike, almost warm. This is Mason Reed from Bright Path Innovations. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Calvin mouthed, Don't. Annie turned away from him. I have a minute. Good. I wanted to follow up on our offer. Our review team remains very impressed with Pulse Route. For someone your age, the work is remarkable. For someone your age, she hated the phrase at once. Thank you, she said. That said, we do need to move quickly. The $12,000 offer is still available, but only until 5 p.m. tomorrow. After that, the budget may be reallocated. Annie closed her eyes. I understand. I also understand from your intake form that there are medical circumstances in your family. I'm sorry about that. Truly. His pause was practiced. Situations like yours are exactly why our fast payment structure can be so helpful. Most companies take months. We can wire funds in 48 hours. Calvin whispered, Predator. Annie covered the phone. Stop. Mason continued as if he had not heard anything. Your mother doesn't have the luxury of waiting, Annie. The kitchen changed around her. The refrigerator hum seemed to fade. The bills on the table, the pill bottles, the envelopes, the laptop, Calvin's angry face. All of it narrowed to that one sentence. It was cruel, because it was shaped like concern. What did you say? Annie asked. I said timing matters. I don't want you to lose an opportunity because of hesitation. No, she said quietly. You don't want to lose a bargain. There was the smallest pause on the line. I'm trying to help you make a practical decision. I'll review the contract. Of course. Just remember the deadline. The call ended. Annie lowered the phone slowly. Calvin stood across from her, his face tight. Please tell me that made you mad enough not to sign. It made me mad, she said. It didn't make my mother less sick. She opened the contract again. The words blurred for a second, then steadied. Assignment of all rights. Perpetual ownership. Non-compete. Confidentiality. No future claims. No royalties. No obligation to credit original developer. It was all there, written in language so calm it almost looked harmless. Mrs. Wilkes knocked once and came in without waiting, carrying a plastic container of oatmeal wrapped in a dish towel. She saw Calvin, the laptop, the papers, and Annie's face. Older women did not need explanations for every kind of trouble. She set the oatmeal on the table. Eat while you think. Annie looked up. I'm not hungry. Mrs. Wilkes took the spoon from the dish towel and placed it in Annie's hand. That's all right, eat anyway. No one spoke for a while. Annie took one bite because refusing would have been harder than chewing. The oatmeal was warm, with cinnamon and a little brown sugar, the way Evelyn made it when there was enough sugar to spare. That almost broke her. Calvin sat down across from her. Let me call Mr. Daniels from the Science Fair Board. Maybe he knows somebody. By tomorrow? Maybe. And if maybe isn't fast enough? He looked down. Annie reached for the pen beside the laptop. It was a cheap blue pen from the hospital billing office. Detroit Mercy General printed on the side in white letters. She rolled it between her fingers and thought about her mother upstairs saying, Who told you your mind was only worth the size of my bill? The pen weighed almost nothing. Still, when Annie set its tip above the signature line, her hand began to shake. Somewhere in the house, the old wall clock ticked. Outside, Mrs. Wilkes's broom scraped the porch again. Life went on with a stubbornness that felt almost insulting. Annie did not sign. Not yet. She capped the pen and placed it beside the contract, close enough to threaten her, far enough to let her breathe. Then she picked up the Harvard envelope and tried to smooth the crease Jonathan had seen in the hospital hallway. The paper did not flatten. Some things, once bent under pressure, kept the mark. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from the hospital. Dr. Morrison wants you back when you can. Your mother is asking for you. Annie stood so quickly the chair hit the wall. Calvin grabbed the food bag and her backpack. She gathered the 3 envelopes, then hesitated over the contract. After a moment, she folded it once and shoved it into the bag too. She did not know whether she was carrying a lifeline or a trap. She only knew both had her name on them. Jonathan did not go back to the hospital board. Claire Bennett was waiting beside the black sedan at the curb when he came through the automatic doors. The folder was still in her arms, pressed flat against her navy jacket as if she had been holding her breath with it. The driver straightened, but Jonathan waved him off and opened the rear door himself. Sir, Claire began. The board packet. Not now. She stopped. A few hours earlier, His tone in the hallway had made her retreat. This time there was no anger in it. That was what unsettled her. Jonathan Whitmore irritated was familiar. Jonathan Whitmore quiet meant something had moved beneath the surface. He got into the car. Claire slid in on the other side, still holding the folder. "Where to?" the driver asked. "The Westin," Jonathan said. Claire turned. "Not the office?" "The hotel first." She looked at him through the dim light of the car. "Is this about the girl?" Jonathan did not answer right away. Outside the window, Detroit was waking in pieces. A bus sighed at the curb. A man in a work jacket crossed the street carrying a lunch pail. Near the hospital entrance, an older woman leaned on a cane and waited for a ride that had not come yet. "What do we own under Bright Path Innovations?" Jonathan asked. Claire blinked. "Bright Path?" "Yes. I'd have to pull the file." "Pull it." She opened her laptop at once, balancing it on her knees as the car moved away from the hospital. Her fingers worked quickly. Jonathan watched the city slide by. Brick buildings, closed storefronts, a church sign with missing letters, a mural of a black child holding a book. He thought of Annie Carter standing in her kitchen with a pen over a signature line he had not seen but could imagine. He thought of Evelyn in room 318 asking who told her daughter that her mind was only worth the size of a bill. Claire cleared her throat. Bright Path Innovations is part of Whitmore Applied Systems, acquired 3 years ago. Structured under the Intellectual Property Development Division, Richard Sloan oversees the financial review. Legal reports to Marbury's team. What do they do? Claire read from the summary. Early stage acquisition of software tools, predictive models, workflow systems, and healthcare. Adjacent intellectual property from independent developers. Mostly small contracts. Low upfront cost. High commercialization potential. Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Say that without the brochure." Claire looked up. He kept his eyes on the window. "Claire, they buy ideas before larger companies notice them," she said. "Often from people who don't have representation." The honesty came out reluctantly, but it came. Jonathan respected her for that and hated the answer. "What's the average purchase price?" "Across all contracts," she scrolled. "Looks like between $8,000 and $25,000 for early-stage tools. Some royalty structures, but mostly buyouts. Non-competes?" Claire hesitated. "Common. How long?" 5 to 10 years. Jonathan closed his eyes for half a second. $12,000. All rights. 10 years. Apparently I'm valuable enough to silence. Just not valuable enough to pay. "Send the full Bright Path acquisition history to my private drive," he said. "Not the board folder. Mine." "Yes, sir." "And don't copy Sloan." That made her stop typing. "Sir?" He turned then. "Did I ask something unclear?" "No." She returned to the laptop. "I'll send it directly." At the hotel, Jonathan went straight to his suite without removing his coat. Claire followed him inside and placed the folder on the desk, but he was already opening his laptop. The room had a view of downtown Detroit, the kind hotels sold to men who wanted to feel near a city without having to hear it. Dawn was thinning the sky behind the buildings. Everything looked softer from up high. That had always been the danger. The Bright Path files arrived in batches. Contracts, acquisition memos, valuation notes, developer profiles. Jonathan opened the first spreadsheet and stared at the rows. Names, ages, zip codes, product descriptions, offer amounts, projected enterprise value. At the far right was a column labeled Strategic Upside. He scrolled. A 22-year-old from Cleveland. $9,000 for a medication adherence app. A community college student from Atlanta. $15,000 for a clinic scheduling model. 2 brothers from Newark. $18,000 for a home care logistics tool. A girl from Fresno, 19 Spanish surname, $12,000 for a bilingual patient intake system. Fast close. No counsel indicated. Full assignment. No royalty. Non-compete enforced. The words repeated until they stopped looking like language and started looking like fingerprints. Claire stood near the door, silent. Jonathan opened the newest intake report. There it was. Annie Carter, Detroit, Michigan, age 18. Product, Pulse Route, Predictive Medical Supply Routing Model. Proposed purchase, $12,000. Rights, full assignment. Royalty, none. Restrictive covenant, 10 years. Urgency factors, family medical debt, pending college enrollment, immediate liquidity need. He read the last phrase twice. Immediate liquidity need. That was what they had called Evelyn Carter's failing kidneys. That was what they had called a girl sitting beside a hospital bed, choosing between her mother's medication and 3 college letters. Not fear, not love, not desperation, liquidity. Jonathan stood so abruptly the chair rolled back and struck the wall. Claire flinched. Get Richard on the phone. It's barely 6. He'll answer. She called. He did. Richard Sloane's voice came through the speaker calm and dry, the voice of a man who had already read 3 market briefings before breakfast. Jonathan. Early morning. Tell me about Bright Path. A pause. Not long, but Jonathan heard the calculation in it. What specifically? All of it. Bright Path is performing well. Small line item, strong upside. It gives us access to early-stage innovation without the cost burden of venture incubation. We've discussed this. I'm asking what we do to the people we buy from. Richard gave a soft sigh. We offer liquidity to independent developers. Many of them would never commercialize otherwise. You mean they're poor? I mean they lack capital. You mean they don't have lawyers? I mean they are often pre-institutional. Jonathan stared at Annie's intake report on the screen. Pre-institutional. That's a clean word. It's an accurate one. An 18-year-old girl in Detroit is about to sign away a medical supply algorithm for $12,000 because her mother is in renal failure upstairs at Mercy General. Another pause. Richard's voice cooled. I assume this is no longer hypothetical. No. Then we should be careful. Direct involvement could create exposure, especially if you've had personal contact. Jonathan almost laughed. Exposure. Not harm. Not injustice. Exposure. The risk, in Richard's mind, was not what had happened to Annie. The risk was that Jonathan had seen it. Is Pulse Route worth more than $12,000? Jonathan asked. I haven't reviewed it personally. Then review it now. Jonathan, these early-stage concepts are speculative. That wasn't what I asked. Richard was silent just long enough to show irritation. If the model performs as described, yes, it could be worth substantially more after development. How much more? Potentially 7 figures. More if integrated into our distribution network. Claire looked up from her laptop. Jonathan sat slowly. And we were going to pay her $12,000. We were going to assume the risk of development. We were going to buy her panic. Richard's voice sharpened. That is not a useful way to frame a business transaction. It is if it's true. Jonathan, you're reacting to a story. I understand the emotional pull, but one girl in a hospital hallway cannot become the basis for corporate policy. Jonathan looked toward the window. Down below, traffic thickened. People were going to work. Some of them would pack medicine they could not afford. Some would clean hospital rooms where they themselves could not pay to be treated. Some would raise children smart enough to change the world and still have to sell the change at a discount. She's not one girl, Jonathan said. Then what is she? Jonathan looked back at Annie's file, at the phrase immediate liquidity need, at his company's logo on the top of the page. She's the first one I was close enough to see. Richard exhaled through the line. What do you want? Everything. Brightpath contracts for 5 years. Developer demographics. Non-compete enforcement. Revenue generated from acquired tools. Internal valuations versus purchase price. And I want renal pricing reports for Mercy General and all associated clinics. That's a wide request. Yes. For what purpose? Jonathan closed the laptop halfway, then stopped. Annie's name was still visible on the screen. To find out how many futures we've been calling growth. He ended the call before Richard could answer. Claire stood very still. Jonathan turned to her. Cancel breakfast. With the hospital donors? With everyone. And the board packet? Leave it. She nodded, then looked at him more carefully. What are you going to do? Jonathan did not answer because the truth was, he did not know yet. He only knew the old answer was no longer available. A check would be easy. A scholarship would be easy. Paying Evelyn Carter's bill would be easy. Easy was the language men like him used when they wanted to feel generous without becoming accountable. He opened the Brightpath report again. Rows of names filled the screen, each one smaller than the profit it had become. First, he said, I'm going to read what I signed. Claire left quietly. Jonathan remained at the desk as the sun rose over Detroit, reading contract after contract while the city brightened beneath the glass. By 7:30, he had taken off his coat. By 8, His coffee had gone cold. By 9, he understood that BrightPath was not a mistake hidden inside his company. It was his company telling the truth about itself in smaller print. At 9:30, Jonathan left the hotel with the BrightPath files loaded onto an encrypted tablet and a headache sitting behind his eyes. He had not slept. He had not changed clothes. Claire walked beside him through the lobby, trying to match his pace while answering messages from people who had been told their morning with him was canceled without explanation. "Legal is asking whether this is an internal audit or a compliance review," she said. Jonathan pushed through the revolving door into the cold Detroit morning. "Tell them it's a question." "What kind of question?" "The kind they should have asked before I did." She looked at him once, then typed without another word. The headquarters of Whitmore MedTech rose 27 floors above Jefferson Avenue, all glass and steel, with a lobby polished enough to reflect the people walking through it. On most mornings, Jonathan barely noticed the security desk, the wall of awards, the framed magazine covers, the screen near the elevators that rotated through phrases like innovation with purpose and care through technology. That morning, each word looked heavier than it had the day before. He wondered how many patients had read them from a hospital bed and believed them. He wondered how many employees had repeated them in meetings while approving the opposite. Claire followed him into the private elevator. "Richard Sloan wants 10 minutes before your review." "No." He said there may be context missing. "I'm sure there is. That's why I'm not starting with him." The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor. People greeted him, then stopped when they saw his face. Jonathan walked past the conference room where breakfast had been laid out for the donor committee. Coffee, cut fruit, pastries, silver tongs, small plates. No one had touched it yet. He looked at the table and thought of Annie smoothing a folded $5 bill on a hospital cafeteria counter. "Send that food downstairs," he told Claire. "To the staff lounge, to security, custodial, whoever's on shift. Not upstairs." "Yes, sir." 15 minutes later, he was in a records room on the 17th floor with Claire, 2 compliance officers, and a junior attorney named Dana Ruiz, who looked as if she had been pulled from sleep and dropped into a storm. Boxes of older acquisition files sat along one wall. On the conference table were 5 years of BrightPath contracts, developer profiles, valuation memos, and internal notes. Dana adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Whitmore, I want to be clear that I'm not the lead attorney on these. I only handled intake review and closing packets." "That's why you're here," Jonathan said. "You saw the first version before anyone cleaned it up." Dana swallowed. "Yes, sir." He opened Annie Carter's file on the screen and turned it toward her. "Walk me through this." Dana looked at the name. Something in her face tightened. "Pulse route. Predictive routing for medical supply distribution. Strong technical submission. Limited validation. But better than most student projects." "Why 12,000? That was the pricing tier." "Based on what?" "Stage, applicant profile, development risk, lack of formal incorporation, absence of counsel, and urgency factors." Jonathan leaned back. "Urgency factors?" Dana looked down. "That's the term in the intake system. What does it mean in English?" Claire stopped typing. Dana drew a breath. "It means the seller needs money quickly." "For what?" "Different reasons. Medical debt, tuition deadlines, eviction, family support, immigration fees, sometimes funeral costs." Jonathan did not move, "And we mark that as useful." Dana's voice dropped. "The system marks it as time sensitive." "That wasn't what I asked." She looked at him then, and for a second he saw not a company lawyer, but a young woman who had known the answer longer than she had allowed herself to say it. "Yes," she said. "It makes them more likely to close." The room went quiet. Jonathan turned a page in the printed summary. "Fast, close prospects." "Is that BrightPath language?" Dana nodded. "Who came up with it?" "I don't know." "Who uses it?" Another pause. "Everyone." Jonathan let the words sit there. Everyone. The most convenient hiding place in any company. He moved to another file. Malik Thompson, 22, Cleveland. Medication adherence app. Sold for $9,000. Internal valuation, after acquisition? Claire found the number. Projected at $1.8 million after integration. Was he paid royalties? No. Credit? No. Counsel? Dana answered. Not indicated. He opened the next file. Sofia Alvarez. 19. Fresno. Bilingual. Patient intake system. 12,000. Claire read from the spreadsheet. Projected value, 3.2 million over 5 years. Royalties? No. Council? No. Jonathan went through file after file, and the pattern did not break. Poor zip codes, young developers, public schools, community colleges, no attorneys, medical emergencies, family debt. Brightpath had not used force. It had used timing. It had found people standing at the edge of a financial cliff and offered cash in exchange for the thing that might have carried them away from it. Dana's hands were folded tight in her lap. For what it's worth, a few of us raised concerns. With whom? Marbury's office first, then finance. We were told the contracts were enforceable and that the sellers received clear disclosure. Did they understand what they were signing? Legally, yes. Jonathan looked at her. That answer is starting to make me sick. Dana nodded once, almost with relief. Me too. Claire's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Richard is outside. Keep him there. A compliance officer named Bell, older, careful, cleared his throat. Mr. Whitmore, if I may. Brightpath's model is aggressive, but it's not unusual in the industry. A lot of early-stage acquisition works this way. Jonathan turned to him. Does that make it better? Bell hesitated. It makes it defensible. There it is, Jonathan said quietly. Bell's face reddened. Sir? The most expensive word in this building. Defensible. Not decent. Not fair. Not something we'd want done to our own children. Just defensible. No one answered. Jonathan opened Annie's technical appendix. The lines of summary were dense, but not unclear. Pulse route could map patient flow, prescription patterns, clinic supply needs, and distribution routes. It could flag shortages before they happened and reroute inventory from overstocked locations to understocked ones. It could reduce spoilage, missed treatments, and emergency shipments. He had paid consulting firms millions to produce less practical thinking. How did this land in a $12,000 tier? He asked. Dana shook her head. Because she had no company, no patent filing, no attorney, and no leverage. The algorithm was evaluated as promising but vulnerable. Jonathan looked up. Vulnerable? That's the word in the scoring model. He almost laughed. We didn't score the product. We scored the person. Dana did not deny it. Claire looked toward the door again. Richard is insisting. Jonathan stood. Good. Let him insist. He gathered 3 files from the table. Annie Carter, Malik Thompson, Sophia Alvarez. Then he stopped and picked up the whole stack instead. Dana, he said, how many contracts like this? In 5 years? A little over 600. How many under 25? About 60%. How many with no counsel? Most. How many tagged with urgency factors? Dana looked down at her notes. 70. 1%. Jonathan walked to the window. From the 17th floor, Detroit looked manageable, laid out in blocks and traffic lines. From far enough away, every city looked as if someone had designed it with care. He knew better now. Some things only appeared orderly because the people hurt by the order were too far below to be heard. He turned back. I want everyone reviewed, not by Marbury's team, outside counsel, independent. I want demographic breakdowns, payment comparisons, internal valuations, enforcement history, and every communication where urgency was used to pressure a seller. Bell shifted. That could create discoverable material. Jonathan looked at him. Then we'd better make sure what it discovers is the truth. The door opened before Bell could respond. Richard Sloane stepped in without waiting to be invited. Silver hair neat, suit perfect, expression composed. His eyes went to the files in Jonathan's hands, then to Dana, then to Claire. This has gone far enough, Richard said. Jonathan studied him for a moment. No, Richard. I'm starting to think it hasn't gone nearly far enough. Richard closed the door behind him. You are turning a manageable contract issue into an institutional crisis. Jonathan placed the stack of files on the table. No, I'm finding out we built one and named it Opportunity. Richard's jaw tightened. You need to be careful with that kind of language. Jonathan thought of Annie in the cafeteria, saying her mother's bill decided where her mind belonged. He thought of Evelyn saying neither of us will be free. For once, he said, I think the language is finally catching up to what we did. Richard Sloane did not sit. Men like him rarely sat when they meant to win. He stood near the door with one hand in his pocket and the other holding his phone, as if the room were an inconvenience scheduled between more important things. "Jonathan," he said, "I understand you were moved by what you saw at the hospital, but we cannot let a personal encounter rewrite acquisition strategy." Dana Ruiz looked down at the table. Claire stayed still beside the window. Bell pretended to read the top sheet in front of him. Jonathan picked up Annie's file. "A girl is being offered $12,000 for a system our own valuation says could be worth 7 figures. Could," Richard said. "Potentially. After capital, development, legal work, regulatory review, integration, and market testing. We assume the risk. She assumes the loss. She receives immediate payment. Because her mother is sick." Richard's mouth tightened. "That is unfortunate. It is not illegal." Jonathan looked at him for a long moment. "I'm going back to Mercy General." Richard frowned. "For what purpose?" "To understand the other side of this report. The hospital already gave us pricing summaries." "I don't want summaries." "Then take counsel." "No. Jonathan, do not speak casually with patients about pricing, treatment, or corporate responsibility. Anything you say could become discoverable." Jonathan slipped Annie's file into his leather folder. "Good." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Good? If the truth is discoverable, maybe it should be discovered." He walked out before Sloan could answer. Detroit Mercy General looked different in daylight. At 2 in the morning, the hospital had seemed like a place held together by machines and waiting. By late morning, it was busier, louder, more exposed. Ambulances pulled in under the emergency canopy. Families moved through the lobby carrying flowers, fast food bags, blankets, worry. A man in a tiger's jacket argued softly with a billing clerk near the elevators. An older woman sat beside him, holding a prescription bag with both hands and staring at the floor. Jonathan entered through the side door this time, avoiding the donor wall. He did not want to pass his own name. Dr. Helen Morrison met him outside renal care. She wore the same white coat, but now there was coffee in her hand and less patience in her eyes. "I heard you were asking questions," she said. "I need to understand the cost structure for patients like Evelyn Carter." "No," she said. "You need to understand the cost." He accepted the correction. "Then show me." She studied him for a moment. "You came without a photographer. That's a start." "I didn't come for praise." "Good. I wasn't offering any." She led him down the corridor. They passed dialysis chairs separated by curtains, patients sitting under blankets while machines did quiet work beside them. Some watched television without seeing it. Some slept. Some stared ahead with the practiced stillness of people who had learned that illness was not one event but a schedule. "That's Mr. Gaines," Dr. Morrison said, nodding toward an elderly black man in a gray cap. "Retired auto worker. Skips one medication every other week because his copay went up. Says he can feel the difference in his hands. But groceries come first." They kept walking. "That's Mrs. Bellamy. Worked school lunch for 32 years. Her daughter drives her here from the east side because paratransit missed pickup twice. When she misses dialysis, she ends up in the ER. The ER costs more than transportation would, but the system pays for emergencies better than prevention." Jonathan listened. A young man in scrubs passed them pushing a cart of supplies. Dr. Morrison stopped beside a storage room and opened the door. Inside, shelves held boxed tubing, filters, gloves, dialysate, syringes, labels with barcodes, quantities, expiration dates. "Some of this comes through your distribution network," she said. Jonathan looked at the shelves. "I know. No, you know the revenue line. You don't know this." She picked up a small box and turned it in her hand. "When the price changes, the hospital shifts cost. When the hospital shifts cost, insurers deny more. When insurers deny more, patients delay. When patients delay, they get sicker. When they get sicker, everybody acts like it was unpredictable." She put the box back. "Was Evelyn delaying treatment?" "Sometimes, not dramatically. That's how poor people survive. They don't announce a collapse. They shave pieces off the plan. Half a dose here, a missed refill there, stretch the bus money, push the follow-up visit, tell the daughter not to worry." Dr. Morrison looked toward room 318. "By the time we call it Sirius, they've been negotiating with Sirius for months." Jonathan thought of Annie's notebook. One page for routing models and another for medicine. Buses. Bills. Why wasn't she covered? She has coverage. That's the American magic trick. A person can have insurance and still not have access. Dr. Morrison's voice stayed even, but the anger underneath had roots. The plan covers enough to say she isn't uninsured. It doesn't cover enough to keep her from drowning. They stopped near a small consultation room. Dr. Morrison motioned him inside and closed the door. The room held a round table, 4 chairs, a box of tissues, and a wall poster about kidney health that looked too cheerful for the conversations it witnessed. She set her coffee down. "Why are you really here?" Jonathan opened his folder and took out Annie's BrightPath summary. He laid it on the table, but did not push it toward her. Annie built a system that could improve medical supply routing. BrightPath offered her $12,000 for all rights, 10-year non-compete. Dr. Morrison did not look surprised. That bothered him more than shock would have. "She told me," the doctor said. "She did?" She asked whether $12,000 would keep her mother's treatment stable for a while. Jonathan felt the sentence in his chest. "What did you say?" "I told her I'm a doctor, not a fortune teller. Then I told her not to sign anything without a lawyer." "And?" She smiled like I had told her not to bleed without a bandage. Jonathan sat back. Dr. Morrison leaned her forearms on the table. "Do you know what poverty does to intelligence, Mr. Whitmore? It doesn't remove it. It corners it. Annie can understand supply chains, predictive modeling, hospital waste, and algorithmic routing. But this week, all that brilliance is being used to answer one question: how much of herself can she sell before her mother gets worse?" Jonathan said nothing. "You people like the word access," she continued. "Access to care, access to innovation, access to opportunity. But access without affordability is a locked door with a nicer sign." He looked at the tissue box, then the poster, then his own hands. "I can pay Evelyn's bill. I'm sure you can. I can do it today. I'm sure you can do it before lunch." He looked up. Dr. Morrison's face softened, but only slightly. "That would help Evelyn. It would help Annie. I would not tell you not to do it if it were offered the right way. But don't confuse relief with justice." He took that in. She sat back. "Charity is what people offer after policy has already failed." The words did not strike loudly. They settled. That was worse. Loud things could fade. Settled things stayed. Jonathan looked through the glass panel in the door. Across the hall, Annie had returned to her mother's room. She was standing beside the bed with her backpack still on, one hand resting on Evelyn's blanket. She looked smaller in daylight, not younger exactly, but more visibly tired. Calvin stood near the wall holding a grocery bag, unsure whether to leave or stay. Evelyn was awake, watching her daughter with a mother's helpless pride. "What happens if Annie leaves for school?" Jonathan asked. "Evelyn will tell her to go. Annie will try. Then every bill, every bad lab, every missed call will pull her back by the throat. And if she doesn't go?" Dr. Morrison looked at Annie through the glass. "Then one day she'll be 35, explaining to some other bright child why dreams are expensive, and she'll do it kindly, because bitterness takes energy she won't have left." Jonathan closed the folder. "I want the actual pricing records for renal medication and supplies, tied to this hospital. You'll need authorization. I'll get it. You'll also need someone willing to tell you what the records mean." He met her eyes. "Will you?" Dr. Morrison picked up her coffee and took one slow sip. "I'll tell you what they mean. I won't help you make it sound better." "Good." "No," she said, standing. "Not good. Necessary." Outside the consultation room, Annie looked up as Jonathan stepped into the hall. For a second, their eyes met. She did not wave. She did not smile. She only looked at him as if trying to decide whether he was another man passing through her crisis or someone about to become responsible for what he had seen. Jonathan had no answer he could give her yet, so he gave her the only honest thing he had. He looked away first, not from shame alone, but because he knew shame was useless unless it learned to move. Jonathan left Mercy General with Dr. Morrison's words still working under his skin. Relief was not justice. Charity was what people offered after policy had failed. By noon, those sentences had followed him through 3 calls, 2 canceled meetings, and 1 silent ride across Detroit to a place he had not visited in almost 2 years. Whitmore Pharmaceutical Distribution Center sat near the edge of the city, a long gray building behind a chain-link fence, with loading bays cut into one side like open mouths. Trucks idled along the dock. Men and women in reflective vests moved between pallets, scanners, and shrink-wrapped boxes marked with hospital names. The sign at the entrance carried his company's logo and a slogan Jonathan had approved years ago without much thought: delivering care where it's needed most. He stood in the parking lot and read it twice. Claire got out beside him, tablet in hand. Operations says they weren't expecting you. That was the point. A security guard hurried from the front desk when they entered. Mr. Whitmore, sir. We didn't get notice. I know. Jonathan signed the visitor log himself. Who's managing this shift? Mrs. Alvarez, sir. I'll call her. No need. I'd rather walk. The guard looked uncertain, but Jonathan was already moving toward the warehouse floor. The first thing that hit him was the sound. Conveyor belts, forklifts backing up, scanners chirping, tape guns ripping across cardboard, ventilation fans pushing stale air from one end of the building to the other. Above it all, the lights shone white and flat, making everyone look a little more tired than they probably wanted to admit. A supervisor in a red vest came quickly toward him. She was in her 40s. Hair pulled back. Radio clipped to her shoulder. Mr. Whitmore. Elena Alvarez. I wish someone had told us you were coming. Then I would have seen what you prepared for me, Jonathan said. I need to see what you don't prepare. Elena glanced at Claire, then back at him. All right. Where do you want to start? With the people? She gave a short nod, the kind that said she respected the answer but did not yet trust the man giving it. She led him down the main aisle. Workers moved with practiced speed, scanning labels and stacking boxes for hospital routes across Wayne County. Jonathan saw renal medication, dialysis filters, tubing, syringes, gloves, lab kits. He saw the same supplies Dr. Morrison had shown him that morning. But here they were not beside patients. They were inventory. How many on this shift? He asked. 46. How many full-time? Elena hesitated. Depends how you define it. Jonathan stopped walking. She exhaled. 14 full-time. The rest part-time. How many hours? Most are scheduled 27 to 28 a week. Claire looked up from her tablet. Jonathan kept his eyes on Elena. Why? You know why? He did. That was the shame of it. 30 hours changed a worker's category. 30 hours meant benefits, eligibility, cost. 27 and a half meant flexibility. That was the word used upstairs. Flexibility. It sounded better than saying a person could work almost enough to qualify for help, but not quite. Who wants more hours? He asked. Elena looked around the floor. Most of them. And we don't give it. No, sir. Why not? This time she did not soften it. Because the scheduling system flags them before they cross the line. They continued toward the packing stations. A woman in her late 50s stood at table 6, placing renal medication into insulated shipping containers with cold packs. She worked without wasted motion, scanning, checking, sealing, sliding the package down the belt. Her name tag read, Marlene Jackson. Elena lowered her voice. Marlene's one of our best. Been here 5 years. Part-time? 28 hours. Jonathan stepped closer. Miss Jackson? Marlene looked up. Her eyes flicked to Elena, then to Jonathan's suit. She understood hierarchy before anyone named it. Yes, sir? I'm Jonathan Whitmore. I know who you are. There was no admiration in it. No rudeness either. Just the same flat recognition Annie had given him in the hospital. Jonathan was beginning to understand how often his name arrived in a room before he did. Can I ask you something? You can ask. Do you want more hours? Marlene sealed another box. I've asked for more hours 3 times. What happened? They told me there wasn't room in the schedule. Then they hired 6 more part-timers. Elena looked down. Jonathan let that land. Do you have health coverage here? Marlene gave a small laugh. No, sir. I'm not full-time enough to get sick. Claire stopped typing. Marlene glanced at the box in front of her. My husband's got kidney trouble. Not as bad as some, but bad enough. Some of what I pack here goes to clinics like the one he uses. I can tell you the product numbers by heart. I can tell you which boxes need cold packs and which ones can ride dry. I can tell you when a shipment's going to be late just by looking at the dock. She pushed the box down the belt. What I can't do, she said, is afford half of what I touch. Jonathan did not speak. Marlene looked him in the eye then. I pack medicine I can't afford. The sentence did not rise. It did not need to. It sat between the beeping scanners and moving belts like something solid enough to trip over. How long has that been true? Jonathan asked. For people like me, Marlene said. Longer than this building's been standing. Elena shifted but did not interrupt. Jonathan looked at the work table. There was a stool pushed under it, unused. Can you sit during your shift? Not unless there's a medical note. Do you have one? My knees hurt. That's not a note. That's age. A man at the next station, maybe 60, muttered, Amen to that. Marlene